powerful 8.8 magnitude earthquake has struck off the coast of Russia's Kamchatka Peninsula. One of the strongest quakes ever recorded, it has triggered widespread tsunami alerts across the Pacific, affecting multiple continents within hours. The event began suddenly, but its impact is still unfolding. The quake's epicenter was located underwater, about 78 kilometers southeast of Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky. It occurred at a shallow depth of just 30 kilometers, making it extremely dangerous. The Kamchatka Peninsula sits along the Pacific Ring of Fire, a volatile seismic zone responsible for 90% of the world's earthquakes. This region has a long history of tectonic activity, but this quake exceeded expectations in both scale and intensity. Within minutes of the quake, tsunami warnings were issued across Russia, Japan, the US West Coast, Hawaii, Alaska, Canada, the Philippines, Taiwan, Australia, New Zealand, and even parts of South America. In Russia, waves up to 4 meters high struck port areas in Severokurilsk and Yelizovsky, flooding streets and damaging infrastructure. Over 2,700 residents were evacuated from the Kuril Islands as a precaution. In Japan, authorities acted swiftly. Evacuation orders were issued in Okinawa, Miyagi, and coastal parts of Hokkaido. Sirens wailed across coastal cities as nearly 2 million people were urged to leave low-lying areas. Waves reached around 3 meters in height, crashing into seawalls and inundating fishing ports. Although there was no major damage, the memory of the 2011 tsunami made the response fast and serious. Meanwhile, in Hawaii, tsunami sirens echoed throughout the islands. People abandoned beaches and coastal roads, heading uphill. Emergency officials activated shelters, closed roads, and urged residents to avoid the ocean. Waves measuring around 1.3 meters reached parts of Oahu and the Big Island, flooding some roads and coastal areas. While the impact was not catastrophic, the alert caused significant panic and disruption. On the U.S. mainland, tsunami watches were issued along the entire West Coast. In California, Oregon, and Washington, coastal authorities urged residents to stay away from beaches and harbors. Although no major waves were reported, harbors were temporarily closed, and emergency centers were activated. In Alaska and British Columbia, minor surges were recorded, but damage was minimal. The effects were also felt across the Pacific. In the Philippines and Taiwan, local authorities closed ports and suspended ferry services. Indonesia issued advisories for coastal cities, and beach communities were told to prepare for potential flooding. In Australia and New Zealand, tsunami warnings led to the closure of beaches in Sydney, Wellington, and Auckland. Evacuations were ordered in some low-lying coastal regions, though wave heights remained below dangerous thresholds. Aftershocks followed quickly. A magnitude 6.9 tremor struck the same region just hours later, shaking buildings in Kamchatka and raising fears of another tsunami. Geologists say this sequence of events is consistent with large-scale tectonic ruptures. In many such cases, powerful aftershocks can continue for days or even weeks, increasing the risk of further damage and anxiety. International response was immediate. The Russian military deployed to the Kamchatka region to assess infrastructure and assist with evacuations. Japan opened crisis centers and dispatched emergency personnel to coastal areas. The U.S. Pacific Tsunami Warning Center kept round-the-clock surveillance on the Pacific Basin. Across the globe, seismologists, disaster agencies, and governments coordinated to monitor, warn, and respond. The science behind such a powerful quake is rooted in the collision of tectonic plates. Along the Kuril-Kamchatka Trench, the Pacific Plate is slowly subducting beneath the Okhotsk Plate. Over decades, stress builds until the fault suddenly slips, releasing energy in the form of a massive earthquake. This event was precisely that, a megathrust quake, capable of displacing vast amounts of ocean water and triggering tsunamis across the world. The last quake of this magnitude in the region was in 1952, which caused a tsunami that reached as far as Chile. Today's quake was even stronger, and with global monitoring and instant communication, its reach felt even more dramatic. Scientists estimate that the energy released by this quake is equivalent to roughly 1.2 gigatons of TNT, far more than any nuclear weapon ever detonated. For people living along the Pacific Rim, this disaster is a reminder of how vulnerable coastal communities remain. Even with advanced warning systems, there's often only minutes to respond. In places like Japan and Hawaii, years of preparation and drills helped avoid large-scale tragedy. But the psychological impact, especially in regions still haunted by previous disasters, remains significant. In the aftermath, many are asking, is this the start of a seismic chain reaction? Experts warn that large earthquakes can redistribute stress along fault lines, potentially triggering new quakes in nearby regions. There is growing concern about vulnerable zones like the Cascadia subduction zone in North America, the Philippine Trench, and the North Pacific Aleutian region. These areas are overdue for major seismic activity, and what just happened in Kamchatka may raise pressure elsewhere. The event also highlights how climate change, while not a direct cause of earthquakes, can amplify their effects. Rising sea levels make tsunamis more dangerous. Melting glaciers and shifting ocean weight can influence tectonic pressure. Coastal cities are growing more crowded, putting millions more at risk when disaster strikes. As recovery begins in Russia and the Pacific, the global community is left with critical lessons. Preparedness saved lives. Communication mattered, but nature's power remains untamable. The 8.8 quake off Kamchatka is a powerful wake-up call for governments, scientists, and everyday people living near the sea.